Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. This is our agenda. First, we'll have an overview of Section 508, and then we'll talk about the 508 standards and how they apply to accessible course design. And then we'll actually look at how to create accessible course content. So one thing I would like to mention, we did distribute a handout before today's session, and the titles on the handout match the titles on the PowerPoint slide, so you're welcome to follow along with your handout. So the first question is, what is Section 508? This is U.S. federal law, and 508 is part of the Rehabilitation Act amendments of 1998, and it states in part that electronic information and data must be equally accessible to individuals with and without disabilities. As clarification, Section 504 and 508, 504, and the ADA all impact the delivery of our online courses and our web-based content. So Section 508 are the actual standards for compliance, and we'll look at these standards in just a minute, and these are A, do this, B, do this. Section 504 and the ADA are different in that those are civil rights legislation, and they prohibit discrimination based on disability. So when individuals file complaints or lawsuits against institutes of higher education, they're actually filing 504 or ADA violations. There is a terrific, what I consider a must-read resource, USG resource, called Higher Education, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and Section 508. And I am going to use AppShare right now and open this document and talk about some information in the document. Okay, so the document is currently on your screen, and we're just going to right now look at the very first paragraph. And the beginning of this document talks about how Section 508 was originally written for federal agencies, but I'm going to read the first paragraph beginning here at the word however in line 4. And it says, however, states that receive funds through the Assistive Technology Act are required to comply with 508. The state of Georgia does receive funds through this initiative. Institutions under the Board of Regents are deemed to fall within the scope of 508. So this is the reason that we are required to comply with 508. Extremely important sentence at the very end of this paragraph. The Electronic and Information Technology Accessibility Standards were released in December of 2000, and consequently the deadline for compliance is or was June of 2001. So for the past 10 years, any content that we place in an online web-based environment is expected to have been compliant at the time that we posted it online. So I would recommend that you visit this web page. The link is on your handout, and you can print this document. It's only about 3 pages long. The first page also talks about Section 508 and the ADA, and then the pages 2 and 3 describe U.S. Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, complaints and ADA violations against California Community College System in 1996 and San Jose State University in 1995, both for inaccessible distance learning and web-based course content, and this includes supplemental materials for face-to-face classes. So these were 508 and ADA violations in 1995 and 96. I'm going to close the app share, return to the slide, and talk about when individuals encounter inaccessible content, they have 3 options. First, they can contact the U.S. Department of Education Office of Civil Rights and file a civil rights complaint against our institutions. They can contact the U.S. Department of Justice, again, file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights. And lastly, they can file a lawsuit in state or federal court for ADA and Section 504 violations. This is a list of more recent lawsuits and civil rights complaints in higher education, and so what I'd like to do is just take a moment and go through each of these complaints and just explain the types of things that were included in the violation. So first we have Florida State University. This was June of this year, so it's only been about 6 months ago. A lawsuit was filed against Florida State regarding the inaccessibility of specialty software that was required for homework assignments and exams, lecture materials, classroom clickers, and required textbooks for a course that were not in an accessible format. In March of this year, there was a civil rights complaint against Northwestern University and New York University, and this was for partnering with Google Apps for Education, which were not accessible. In November of last year, there was a landmark civil rights complaint filed against Penn State University for inaccessible computer and technology-based services, departmental websites, online library catalog, their learning management system, which at the time was Angel, and the use of smart podiums and bank ATMs on campus that were not accessible. In May of 2010, a civil rights complaint was filed against 9 law schools, which required the use of a third-party software to apply, website and software, to apply for admission to law school, and that software was not accessible. In July of 2009, there was a lawsuit filed against Arizona State University for the required use of Kindle, which was not accessible, and there was such concern over the widespread introduction of Kindles in higher education that a joint letter was authored by the U.S. Department of Justice and U.S. Department of Education Offices of Civil Rights that was distributed to all college and university presidents, warning against the use of Kindle in the classroom. And lastly, in May of 2009, there was a civil rights complaint filed against, it was actually 5 California law schools, and again, it was for requiring the use of a third-party software to apply for admission, and that software was not accessible. So our takeaways from this list should be, first, we need to be aware of what's happening in higher education so that we can modify our own use of products and technologies that are not accessible. And 2, the reason that we're here today is that we need to know how to create 508 compliant online courses and content, because most of these complaints, 5 out of the 6, involved inaccessible web-based content. So how do we create accessible courses and content? There is a set of standards and a set of guidelines that we are expected to follow. First, Section 508, the Board of Regents requires that we comply with 508, and I would like to mention that the 508 refresh is underway. This is an update to the original standards that were written in 1998, and there have been a lot of new technologies developed since that time that are not addressed in the existing 508 standards. The 508 refresh, they've been working on it since 2006, so it's been about 5 years, and it was expected to be released in 2012, and we just received notification last month that they now expect that it will be released in November or the end of 2013. So we should continue to comply with the existing 508 standards. There is another set of guidelines, and these are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. This acronym is pronounced WCAG, and the Board of Regents endorses compliance with WCAG 2.0. These are international guidelines that are published by the World Wide Web Consortium, and these are similar but not the same with Section 508. So we do need to be aware and familiar with both of these. The WCAG 2.0 guidelines were updated in 2008, so they do address some newer technologies that are not directly addressed in the existing 508 standards. So my recommendations for those of us here today are, first, if you are a newcomer to Section 508, I would recommend that you focus on the existing Section 508 standards, and I have a link in the handout, and I'm going to share this document with the group in just a moment. There is a terrific 508 checklist available from WebAIM, and it goes through each of the standards, tells you what it is, and then shares some things that will pass or fail that standard so you can learn how to comply with 508. If you're experienced with 508, I would recommend that you review the WCAG 2.0 Level A and Level AA guidelines. And again, there's a checklist that I'm going to share with you in just a minute. And for all of us, we should remain aware of the status of the Section 508 refresh. And one way that you can do this is to join the Web Accessibility Group that we started here at UGA, but it is open to everyone throughout the university system. We have about 14 institutions throughout USG that are represented, and about 90% of the people on our listserv are newcomers to Section 508. So please feel free to join the listserv. I'll be sending out updates about the 508 refresh, and you can ask questions and learn from each other's experience with trying to comply with 508. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to open AppShare again, and I'm going to show you the 508 checklist from WebAIM. Give me just a moment. I'm learning Collaborate. This is my first time presenting with the new Collaborate product. This is the WebAIM homepage, and this is a fantastic resource for learning about web accessibility and following the web accessibility guidelines. On the bottom, on the right-hand side, there is a link for a Section 508 checklist, and if you select this link, this checklist is available in HTML format and also a downloadable or printer-friendly PDF file. And when you visit this checklist, in the leftmost column is the existing 508 standard, and A says a text equivalent for every non-text element shall be provided. We're going to describe what that means in our session today. And in the center column, it tells you things that you can do to pass this checklist, and on the far right, things that you might be doing that will fail this checklist. And this checklist, I'll scroll down just a little bit, goes through all of the 508 standards. This is a terrific resource for learning Section 508. I'm going to go back to the WebAIM homepage. Below that checklist is WebAIM's WCAG 2.0 checklist. And again, you can scroll down, and here you can see this is the success criteria. It's Level A, and on the right are WebAIM's recommendations for complying with WCAG 2.0. So these are two terrific resources for learning how to comply with the 508 and WCAG 2.0 guidelines. I'm going to stop the app share and come back to our slides. So next, what I'd like to talk about is how people with disabilities use the web and the types of barriers that they encounter in online courses and content. So this is a video. The link is in the handout again, and if you don't have the handout, we can make sure that you get one before we finish today. This is a terrific video, and whenever I do face-to-face trainings, I always show this video. It's 11 minutes. We were concerned the video might not work properly within Collaborate, and so what I've done is I have my next slide is I'd like to take a moment to just stop and summarize what each of these students encounter, with the types of assistive technologies they use and the types of problems they encounter when they try to visit websites. So on the bottom left, the first person, the student is Kyle Woodruff, and Kyle is blind, and he uses JAWS, which is a screen reader technology, and it reads the information on the screen to him. And Kyle says that in the video that he stays away from online courses because he's 90% sure that he's going to have trouble accessing the content because people don't make their online courses accessible. He also describes a bad experience he had with an online form for one of his classes that was not accessible. And so it is possible, we're not going to discuss it today in our session, but it is possible to make online forms accessible, so we do need to be sure that that's also a part of our compliance plan. He had to invite a friend over. They printed the form, and the friend spent 3 to 4 hours helping him fill out the paper form. And so that's one of the difficulties individuals who have a vision impairment encounter. And to the right is Gordon Rikens, and he has quadriplegia, and Gordon uses a mouse stick to tap out keys on the keyboard because he can't use his mouse. So when in accessibility, when we talk about making things keyboard accessible, this is the type of technology that people use when they are trying to access our web content if they can't use a mouse. And Gordon says in the video, for him, some sites are very accessible, but others he gets stuck after just one or two links. And Gordon says that the educational environment just hasn't made it a priority to make web accessibility, the web accessible for people with disabilities. And the third student in the video is Curtis Radford, who is deaf. And in the video, he tries to access an online science tutorial about how the heart works. And Curtis thought the tutorial was only visual because there were no captions. And a message popped up and said that the audio would begin, and he signs to the interpreter, "Oh, really?" because he would have had no idea that there was an audio component. And Curtis said that for him, watching the tutorial was like trying to put together the pieces of a puzzle. He had to assume what kinds of things were taking place, assume what he was expected to learn in the video. And I have a quote from Curtis, and he says, "When there's voice, you need captions. Not fancy art or extravagant graphics. You just need captions. It's that simple." And so these are the types of experience that individuals with disabilities have when they try to access our content. And the video demonstrates why we work to make our content accessible. It isn't just about avoiding lawsuits or following sets of rules or guidelines. It's about people like Kyle and Gordon and Curtis, and ensuring the content that we place online is accessible. So next we're going to talk about the Section 508 standards and accessible course design. And first I'd like to review the benefits of 508 compliance. First and foremost, our primary concern is when we comply with Section 508, we make our websites and content accessible to individuals with disabilities. We also comply with U.S. federal law. And then some additional benefits when we utilize the techniques and requirements for complying with 508, we actually make our web-based content and our websites more usable for all learners, regardless of the type of technology they're using to access our site. It also allows us to accommodate different learning styles, assist speakers of English as a second language, and captions have also been shown to increase comprehension for all learners. So you can search information in captions and text transcripts that you can't on the video itself. It allows students to recognize and research unfamiliar terms that they encounter in a video, and also it allows the content to be accessed in situations that are not audio friendly. So next I'd like to talk about 508 and online courses. So there are three aspects to making an online course 508 accessible. First, the framework, which is Blackboard Vista for us, and then there is accessible design and navigation, and then the accessible course content. So when we are working to make our content accessible, we are concerned with items 2 and 3. Blackboard Vista is responsible for making the product accessible. If you are a website designer, you need to work to make your website compliant, but as online course users of Blackboard Vista, we are required to design and navigate an accessible course, and then also to create accessible course content. So I'd like to now start with, just noticed a question. One moment. I'm going to pause for just a moment to read this question. Do we have to be 508 compliant with every online class, or only when we know there is a student with disabilities? We are required for all of our classes to be 508 compliant. So now I'd like to talk about the things that we can do to make our online courses accessible. And first, one of the easiest things that we can do is to include an accessibility statement on our syllabus and or on our Blackboard Vista homepage. To find a sample accessibility statement, my first recommendation is to check with your own institution the Disability Resource Center, or you might have an accessibility resource initiative on your campus. So check with your own institution and find out if there is a sample accessibility statement that you can place on your syllabus in your Blackboard Vista course. If you don't find one, you are welcome to visit the UGA Disability Resource Center website, and they have a sample disability statement there. And this is a very simple statement, and I'll read it to you. It's currently geared towards face-to-face classes, so you'll need to make one adjustment for an online course. But this statement says, if you have a disability and require reasonable classroom accommodations, please see me after class or make an appointment during office hours. If you plan to request accommodations for a disability, please register with the Disability Resource Center, and then the information for the center is provided. So essentially what we want to do with our accessibility statement is encourage individuals to contact us if they find inaccessible content in our courses. And there's also a longer statement available at Chico State University, and I've provided that link also on the handout. I have a Blackboard Vista course that's used for professional development, and I have a statement on my course that says, we welcome your feedback regarding the accessibility of this course and content. If you would like to report an accessibility concern, please contact, and then I provide my name and information. So this is a way to encourage individuals to contact us directly if they find information that's inaccessible. And from there, you may want to contact your institution's Disability Resource Center and then get their assistance in what you need to do next. So next, about your course structure, you want to be sure to follow a simple and consistent course design. You want to avoid confusing students and avoid the treasure hunt. Sometimes when we create our online courses, students have to hunt for information. So, and that can be a difficult experience. And so, first, organize related content in folders or learning modules. And then also establish a consistent layout. Use the same icon layout for all the folders in your online course. Use the same display options for all learning modules. And then use a consistent color scheme and logical order for your content. This is a screenshot of Blackboard Vista, and to change the icon layout for your folders, from the Build tab on the right, you'll select Page Options, and then Customize Page Display. And then here you can select the icon layout that you wish to use, and the sample one that's shown here in the screenshot with two icons across and 3 down is a good layout to use. Below these layouts, you have 2 options. One, you can select to change all of your existing folders to this setting, and so it's easy to change your existing content to the inaccessible layout. And also, you can set your default so that when you create new folders, they will automatically use this setting. And then you can save your changes, and then that's how you can have an accessible icon layout. For creating consistent learning modules, what you'll do is from the Build tab, again, you'll select Learning Modules. And then to the right of your learning modules, there's that little gray action menu, and you'll select that and then edit your learning module properties. And of course, for your learning module, you want to be sure that the title is concise and descriptive of the content behind the learning module. And then here for the table of contents, you have the option to display the table of contents, which can be a helpful navigation tool, or not display. So whichever you choose to do, be sure that it's similar for all your learning modules. And then also how you choose for the learning module to open, either directly to the table of contents or the first page. And then save your changes. So next I'd like to talk about course layout, and it's important with your layout to design for ease of use. You don't want too many items on your home page because it will distract users, and also assistive technologies read both an icon name and the text, and so they will hear that information over and over as they attempt to access the icons on your home page. And also, fewer items on the home page or in your course will make assistive technologies work faster and more efficiently. So first, keep your home page simple and uncluttered, you want to minimize the number of icons on the home page, and design your icon layout for minimal scrolling. So you want to try and avoid horizontal scrolling, so you wouldn't want one row of icons and then multiple across that would require an individual to scroll to the right, and minimize the amount of vertical scrolling when possible. Use both the icon image and the link text on your home page, and this is the default for Blackboard Vista. And also provide unique and descriptive titles for all of your icons, your content, and your course. So this is how you can change the link titles on the home page if you go back and realize that they're not descriptive. From the Build tab, you select the Action menu to the right of an icon name, and be sure to select Customize Link, and then this is the best place for you to go in and change the titles of any icons on your home page. And I noticed there are some questions coming into the chat box, and what I'm going to do is pause before we talk about making course content accessible, and we'll come back and address some of these questions. So the next accessibility feature is navigation. You want to ensure that your course menu is organized and up to date. This is incredibly important for Blackboard Vista courses, and it can really be difficult for individuals using various types of assistive technologies to access your course if the course menu is disorganized. So the first thing you should do, every one of us should have the search tool added as a tool in our online courses, and then move it to the top of the course menu so it's easy to access. And then you want to move frequently used tools just below the search tool and remove all Blackboard Vista tools that are not currently in use. So I'd like to here show you how to do this. You can be either on the Build or Teach tab, and you'll select Manage Course. And if you select Tools, you'll find a checkbox to the left of every tool that's added to your course. So you'd want to go in and be sure that you check the search tool and then uncheck any other tools that you're not currently using. And then if you select Course Menu, down here at the bottom of the screenshot on the right is where you can reorder the content on your course menu. So this again is extremely important. You can imagine an individual who may be using a mouse stick to tab through your course menu, and if your search feature is at the very bottom, or if the person has to tab through tools that are not being used in your course, it can be very tiring and very difficult to access your online course. Next, this is not a 508 requirement, but it is an accessibility recommendation or best practice, and that is to provide an orientation document on your home page. And this would describe the overall layout of your course, that you have learning modules or folders on the home page, and describe the types of content that are available in the course, if it's PDF files, Word documents, multimedia files. Also describe the features or tools that will be used or required for the course, and some faculty members automatically provide a similar paragraph on their syllabus, and you could just also make this available in your online course as well. You can include the accessibility statement here again and provide your contact information and welcome suggestions on how you can increase the accessibility of your course. This is a sample orientation document that we used. It's actually for a WebCT course that we established back in 2002 that was extremely popular with our audience, and so I wanted to just share with you one type of orientation document. We had 9 icons on the home page, and we created this document and we numbered the icons on the home page, and then we went through the document and said, number 1, this is what you'll find behind 1, 2, 3, etc. When we did a survey of the participants, ultimately we had over 400 participants in this course, but we did a survey with the first 50. We asked them, we provided all the information in the course and asked them to let us know which ones were most helpful, and they all chose the orientation document. And then we asked them to select their top 3 most helpful items in the course, and the orientation document was there as well. And I think it's important to note that we can't assume that when individuals access our online course that they can see the layout of the course and see the type of content that's available, and we can't assume that individuals are already familiar with Blackboard Vista. So this is a great way that you can increase the accessibility of your course. About your color scheme, these are 508 requirements. You can use to choose your colors carefully, you can use the built-in Blackboard Vista high contrast color scheme. And also you want to avoid using color alone to convey important information. So color is fine, but you just need to avoid color coding your content, for example, with red and green, because people who are red-green colorblind won't be able to distinguish the difference. So you wouldn't want to say, red team, follow this, green team, follow this, and color code that. You also want to be careful about the use of pastels. People who have low vision will see pastels as a similar shade of gray. And your color scheme applies to your text and background, in graphics, and in your documents. And there is a tool that's listed here. It does not work within Blackboard Vista, but for those of you who may have images and you want to check to see the accessibility of those images, you can upload them to this tool called VizCheck, and you can also run this tool on an external web page and then to look at how different people with different types of visual disabilities will see your web content. So this is how you can select the high contrast color scheme in Blackboard Vista. You can again select either the Build or Teach tab, Manage Course, select Colors, and then in the screenshot on the right, select High Contrast, Apply, and now you've selected a high contrast color scheme for your course. It's really that simple to do that. This is an example of good versus poor color contrast for your content, and so you may be able to just visually inspect your content and determine if the contrast is high enough. The example on the left uses white background with black text, which is the most accessible. Doesn't mean that we can't use color. We just need to ensure that our background color is light and the text color is dark, and that will help ensure high contrast. And then the example on the right is poor contrast, and my expectation is most of us will have difficulty because the background color and the font colors are too close in color, and so it's very difficult to read the text on the screen. So that's an example of good versus poor contrast. This is an example of using color coding. Now, it's certainly okay to use color in our courses and in our images, but what we don't want to do is have color be the only means of conveying important information. So for the map on the left, it has color-coded bus routes. And so if you wanted to share directions with your students and say, take the blue route to locate the field trip or the lab location for this course. Well, individuals who can't see these colors will see the image on the right, and they will not have any idea how to locate or find that location. So what you could do instead is you could use the color image, but say use the blue route, begin at Victoria Station, take the next stop at Green Park, and then up to the Oxford Exchange. And so color is okay, just don't let it be the only means of conveying important information to your students. About your backgrounds, be sure to keep your background simple, and this applies to your home page, to documents, PowerPoint slides. That's a big offender of having difficult or backgrounds that overpower the slides. You want to make sure your background design does not overpower the text, and again that there's high contrast between your text and your background. And this isn't a bad example, and this shows how the background color can overpower your text. There just isn't enough contrast, and the background is too busy. So your backgrounds should be very subtle, and lighter color is best, and then your text should be a strong dark color, blue or black. Screen flicker, moving or blinking text, essentially you shouldn't use it. The upcoming or updated Accessibility designs say that you should ensure that no component of your web content flashes more than 3 times per second, and that you should avoid a flicker rate of more than 2 or less than 55 hertz. This can be very difficult to determine, and for that reason, most people say just remove anything that is flickering, moving text, animated GIFs, a blinking image, or a little bobbing head. All of those things are distracting. They can cause epileptic seizures for some people. So the best advice is, and this is a 508 requirement, to just avoid anything that has flicker or moving or blinking text. Regarding email, it's best to allow students to use an external email system. They are customized for their specific type of assistive technology. They have the proper color contrast that they need. They have able to customize the font size. So it's best not to require that they use the internal Blackboard Vista email system, but instead allow them to use their own external email system. And a bit of advice about accessible emails: you always want to top post when you reply to an email, and that means that your reply appears above or on top of the original post. Or you might remove the original post altogether and only have your response in the reply email. And this is because assistive technologies will have to read the previous post before they get to your response if it appears below. So be sure to top post when you reply. And also, if you want to provide an inline response, and this means that maybe you have a text that has a paragraph with 5 sentences and you want to insert a response in the middle of that, be sure that you remove as much of the surrounding text as possible and prefix the previous text. I said remaining, but I apologize. It should be the previous or original text with something other than punctuation, like quotation marks, because a lot of individuals who use screen readers, for example, will turn off punctuation to make the screen reader technology work faster and more efficiently. So instead, the default for most email systems is to use this forward arrow to indicate the original text when you respond to an email. So this is perfectly fine to use. Just be sure that you don't change that and use quotation marks instead. And I do see that current message, the most recent, the mail system is accessible. It's just easier for individuals with disabilities to utilize their external system. This is a list of some inaccessible tools in Blackboard Vista 8, and it was compiled by California State University at Chico. And the information about Blackboard Vista is no longer available on their website, and so this is what I've used to share some inaccessible tools. The first is chat and whiteboard. You want to avoid required participation in real-time sessions. People who have mobility impairments may not be able to respond quickly to real-time chat. And with the whiteboard, if an individual draws a design on the whiteboard, there's no way to make that accessible. So the chat and whiteboard are considered inaccessible, and so you should avoid required participation in these sessions. It is okay to add the chat feature if you want to allow students to use chat for their projects, but you can't require use with those technologies. About the grading forms, they've also been found to be difficult or inaccessible for people with different types of assistive technologies, and so the suggestion is that you provide an alternate means of communicating with students who can't access the grade forms. For example, you can copy and paste information from the grading forms into an email and communicate with the individual via email. And the Who's Online feature is also inaccessible. Wimba, a lot of folks have asked about the accessibility of Wimba, and Wimba offers a fully accessible interface. There is an accessibility best practices guide for Wimba. It's about 20 pages, and it will tell you how to get into the accessible interface and then how to utilize the accessible interface. Wimba also offers a, sorry, I was distracted by the text chat. Wimba also offers captioning, so captioning can be provided within Wimba, and then an individual would type CC, and it would turn captioning on in the text chat. So captioning would appear within the text chat frame. You can also hire an external captioning company, and they could caption your Wimba session in an external or secondary window. You can also, in Wimba, you can type /SD for slide description in the text chat. You might try that the next time you're in a Wimba session. You don't have to be in the accessible interface to do this. Just type /SD, and the text from the PowerPoint slides in your Wimba presentation will appear in the text chat as well. So one thing that it can't do is it can't describe images in your presentation. So to make those accessible, what you would need to do is upload your PowerPoint presentation to Wimba, and then in the folder where those slides exist, you'll see a button up above that says Show Slide Descriptions, and then it will show you the slide descriptions as they'll appear in the text chat. You can locate slides that have images and type in the slide description for anyone who isn't able to see the slides on screen. And Blackboard Collaborate, we haven't all begun using this yet, but I would like to mention that it does have a number of accessibility features, and the link to these features are available in today's handout. So before we move on to creating online courses, I'd like to pause and ask if there are questions about any of the information that we've talked about. And I'm going to take... Oh, thank you, Jim. Go ahead.
Yeah, Janet, to make it easier for you, I've summarized the questions. Sean wanted to know, should every image or video used include a description of the image and video?
Okay,
yes.
Section 508 does require that it be described, and so you should describe the video, what's taking place in the video, unless it's a talking head and you don't have to provide a description, and you should always describe what's taking place, images. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about multimedia, and I think there'll be some more information at the end and a reference for when your content has to be captioned.
Okay, Martha Colvin, therefore, should each university have a standard for this for each degree program, or is it acceptable to have standardized in a course? I have heard that many of the better online proprietary schools are consistent across everything.
That's a good point, and I think within USG we might not have that. We may all be doing our own thing at different institutions, if I'm understanding the question correctly. But we are sharing all of these comments after today's session, and any questions that came in prior to the session during registration. We are sharing all of those questions and comments with USG after today's session, so we'll be glad to share that as well. But there is no standard.
Okay, could you comment on PDF files? Do those function well in screen readers for the blind, for the disabled?
We are about to talk about accessible PDF files, so I might save that question for our demonstration in just a second.
Tanya wanted to know about a UGA Blackboard accessible template. Couldn't that be available so that all courses are set up with guidelines unless the faculty member changes it?
That's a terrific point. At this time it isn't. We actually had a meeting just before this session, and we were talking about some things that we thought would be helpful here at UGA, and I will be glad to mention this also to the group. So thank you for that comment, and I'll bring that forward to them.
Okay, and then there's a question from Sean. I teach music. How can I offer captioning for songs used in modules?
You can provide captioning for the words of the songs, and so I'm also going to share some information about captioning in just a moment of audio files. That will be with the multimedia after we talk about documents.
Okay, with external emails, are we able to avoid privacy FERPA violations? And what with, actually that's the same question twice. So what about FERPA when you use external email?
Actually, I'm not sure, but we can look into that and then share what we find out with the folks who participated in today's session.
Okay, we've caught up, and so Pat Humphrey in your screen there has a question if you just want to take it right there.
Okay, just a moment, I'm going to scroll back. Yes, graphs and math and statistics courses. I'm about to share with you how to make graphs and charts, some basic information for you. I also have some links. And so, yes, what you should do is you describe the visual appearance of the graph or chart without providing an interpretation, and that's what we want the students to do. So, yes, there are ways that you can do that. And also with math, I have a link for you for anyone who uses math equations on how to make those accessible. And I see the question, the new course management system, it does have a great number of accessibility features, and so we have reviewed that, and I'm actually on the committee here at UGA, and I've been looking at that as well. So we are concerned about that, but I will say that Desire to Learn does have, at this time, some terrific accessibility features already built in. And what about tools used on the internet for course activities? Similar to the lawsuits we described at the very beginning of the session, those tools need to be accessible for your students. So we are required that if we utilize third-party tools or software such as the law school admission process or the Google apps or different things, those things need to be compliant as well. Because part of 508 actually says that anything that we purchase, it isn't just websites, anything that we purchase needs to be accessible, and any external sites that we refer people to should be accessible if we are going to require participation on those sites.
Okay, I think that catches it up.
Super, thank you, Jim. Okay, I'm going to pause for a moment and get my files here together. Okay, so next we're going to talk about creating accessible course content. These are popular content formats listed, and we're going to talk about these different types of document formats. I'm actually going to open a Word document and demonstrate how you can take an existing document and convert it to an accessible Word document. Also a PDF file, and talk about PowerPoint. And then we're also going to talk about multimedia. I know this is an important concern for a lot of folks, so we're going to talk about that as well. So first, regarding documents, there's a link in your handout to terrific 508 checklists. And we did have a couple questions from folks. How do I check my content to make sure that it is accessible after I have tried my best to create accessible content? And these are terrific checklists available from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. And I'm going to go to this website and share these checklists with you. So just a moment, I'm going to open application sharing. Give me just a second to move the windows. Okay, so this link is available in your handout, and you can select a checklist for any of these: Word, PDF, multimedia, HTML, PowerPoint, and Excel. So I'm going to open the PDF checklist for Word, and if you give me a moment, I'm trying to arrange this on the screen so you can see more of this document. Okay, I'm going to scroll down and show you this checklist. So item number 1 on this checklist says, has the document been formatted using style elements? And I'm about to show you how to do that in Word. It's extremely easy to do. So you would read this, and if you did use styles, select Pass, and then go through this entire checklist. Does the document refrain from using flashing, flickering text or animated text? And we talked about that when we talked about our online course homepage or content. We always want to make sure we don't use that. So if we did refrain from that, we would select Pass. And you can go through this document, scroll through. It has 3 sections 4 sections, and then it has a summary of those sections at the bottom. And this is a terrific checklist. Once you go through this a couple of times for your content, it will become very familiar to you and easy for you to check your document. There's also one for PDF and Excel, and I know some folks have asked about those types of documents. Another resource is also with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Resources, has a great document for testing 508 compliance. It's very similar to the checklist, but these sections actually have screenshots that tell you how to achieve that type of compliance. And so if I could find one, I might put here, so you can tell here on this image where they've actually used screenshots, how to format your picture, how you should lay out the photo, etc. So for those of you who would like screenshots, you can use this also to test your document. And then the last resource I'd like to share with you before we get started, again, is WebAIM. At the top of the page, I'm going to select Articles. When you scroll through this list, you can see there are information on how to create accessible HTML content, also rich media, Acrobat PDF files, all this about captioning, Flash. It is possible to create accessible Flash, OpenOffice, PowerPoint, and Word. These are terrific tutorials or instruction information that you can use when you're creating your own accessible content. So I'm going to stop the app share and return to the slide. So again, these links are on your handout for today. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we need to do for all documents, and then I'm going to open Word, and I'm actually going to show you how to do this in your document. So this is not 508 requirement, but these are some best practices in accessibility that I want to share with you. First, it is important to note that we can make Word and PDF and PPT files accessible. It's important to note that HTML is typically the most accessible and preferred document type. So if you do have the ability to create or the experience in creating HTML, it's important to note that it is the most accessible document type. And also, the recommendation is that you provide your text content in more than one format, if it's possible. And I'd like to share with you real quick why this is so. And I'm going to use this example here on the right about PowerPoint and PDF. We can follow the accessibility guidelines and create an accessible PPT or PowerPoint file. But what do most people do when they want to post it as a printer-friendly format on their website? They'll say File, Print to a PDF as handouts with 6 slides per page. That is definitely not an accessible PDF file. So since you already worked to create an accessible PPT file, you can post in your web location the PPT file and then the printer-friendly PDF file. And so that's why that recommendation is there. Similarly with Word, you can create an accessible Word document. It's very simple to do this. And then what do most people do? File, print to Adobe PDF for a printable version of it. But again, you will lose your accessibility features that you worked hard to create in the original Word document. So again, it can be easy. Most PDF files are created originally in a different format, and so it can be simple to provide both of these. So just to let you know, it is beneficial if you can do so. So regarding all documents, first you want to ensure readability of your documents, and many people already do this. I'm going to pause for just a moment. I hear another mic open. I want to be sure it's not distracting anyone. Jim, do you know if we could mute that other mic? Thank you. Okay, great. Okay, so you want to ensure the readability of your document. For people who have cognitive disabilities and learning disorders, they're unable to focus on large amounts of information at one time. So you want to avoid complex sentences. This could be a paragraph that's one sentence. We've seen some of those. Try to avoid very complex sentences and divide large blocks of information into smaller, more manageable sections. And always use proper or true numeric or bulleted lists. You don't want to indent, make a dash, type your text, and create a list in that format. That will not be accessible, and it will not translate as a list to assistive technologies. And also, resist the urge to change a font size or color to indicate a heading or other important information, because that only creates visual structure. It does not create a structure that assistive technologies will recognize as the true structure of the document. Instead, what you want to do is in Word or OpenOffice, you use styles, and I'm going to demonstrate that in just a moment. In Adobe Acrobat, it's called tags, and that's what you'll use to create semantic structure for your documents. The standard font size is 12 point, and you always want to use a sans serif font. There are a couple of examples. Arial, Verdana, and Tahoma are all sans serif. That might not be the type of or style of font you're accustomed to using, so it's actually a great resource online where you can check an alphabetical list of whether the font that you typically use is serif or sans serif, and you always want to use the sans serif. And the reason is it will enlarge better on screen magnifiers, or if people zoom in on the text, the serif fonts can become pixelated and it's difficult to read the text. So the first example in the screenshot is a sans serif font, and next is a serif font, and you can see it has jagged edges. And then on the last example, these are in red. It might appear as a green color for some folks, and this shows you exactly where the elements are that cause this to be a serif font, and this is what doesn't work with accessibility. So you always want to be sure that the font type that you use is sans serif. For all documents, what I'd like to do is to ask you to hold on to this page on your handout, and I'm going to open Word and share Word, my Word application with you with a document that was already created with visual styles, and we're going to visual structure, and we're going to change that. And then I'm going to go through this list on that document and demonstrate how to incorporate all of these items into an accessible document. Oops. Pardon me just one moment. Here we go. Okay, so this is Word 2010 is the version of Word that I'm using, and this is a 6-page document that was created using visual structure. And by visual structure, I mean a font size was enlarged or made bold to indicate title or headings, and we want to change this to using styles. Styles are available on the right. It's extremely simple to use these styles. What you can do is select this drop-down menu, and it will reveal the styles that are most commonly used. And you can also, if the style you need isn't there, you can select this little gray button, and it will open more styles. So if you don't find the styles you need on this primary list, you have a second location. And you can also go to Options and select All Styles, and it will give you an even longer list. So there are styles available for pretty much everything you need to do in Word. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to highlight the title of this document. It was originally created in bold, but we want it to be called a heading in the style. So I'm just simply going to select heading, and then I'm going to come back and change my formatting, and now I've just created an accessible heading. There are several styles available in the style set, and I don't think this works with AppShare. Now, when you use this in your own location, as you scroll over these different types of styles, it will change the visual appearance of the style. And so you have lots of visual styles to choose from, and they're still accessible styles. So I'm going to go back to the style set and go back to the standard Word 2010. So again, you do have a choice of how the style appears on the screen. So we've made our title accessible. Your title is always your heading 1. And then I'm going to click here at this first paragraph, and we want this to be styled a normal paragraph, and it's already come through that way. Now this document has 9 sections. Every section of your document is a heading 2. So what I'm going to do is scroll through my document. I'm going to highlight every section title and name it a heading 2. If I had subheadings within these, I would name those heading 3. So this is very simple to do. Heading 2. Number 5, heading 2. Number 6, heading 2. Number 7, heading 2. Number 8, heading 2. And the last one, number 9, heading 2. I'm now going to scroll back to the top of my document. If I only did this, this has significantly, in a very short time, significantly increased the accessibility of this document. An individual using a screen reader technology, the screen reader will open the document, it will read the title, and it will say there's one heading 1 and there are 9 heading 2 subsections, and that gives the individual the opportunity to understand an overview of the document without the screen reader having to scroll through or read through 9 or 6 pages of text, all 9 sections, for the individual to understand the overview of the document. So that has just significantly increased the structure of our document. We do want to check, and I just did, this is, I'm going to scroll back up here, this is designated normal paragraph is correct. Go to this paragraph, and for some reason this was not designated normal. Just going to click, this is a normal paragraph. Now this text is actually a quote. So I'm going to expand my style list, select quote, and it's now indicated as a quote. I'm going to go to the next section, I have to scroll up. That's normal, that's fine. Normal paragraph. Normal is fine. This is 2. And again, I'm checking the beginning of the paragraph, and I'm looking up here on the right to be sure it's designated normal. So now we've come across a list. When I select the just before the F in the first item on the list, if I look up here, if this list was created using the True List feature in Word, it will translate as an accessible list. So this list is fine. This is normal paragraph. Now we have another list, but what happens here, it's not designated as the standard list, because when I look up here, this is not a list. So all I need to do is click and highlight. This is going to highlight a lot of text. Highlight all the text, and I'm going to come to the list, select this, click off. If you give me a moment, I'm going to scroll back up to the top. Select here. This is now designated as a true list, and now this document is significantly more accessible. I'm going to scroll down below this list. We notice here I have an email address, and this email address is linked, and so that email address is fine. And I select here for this paragraph. Up here it's not yet considered normal, so I'm going to select normal. But here I have a hyperlink. So hyperlinks need to use descriptive text of what the individual will encounter when they visit that link. So some accessibility checklists will say it's okay if it just says www.uga.edu, but this is a full link, and so what we want to do is to change this from the actual link text to what this document is, and it's the community guide. And so what I'll do is I'm going to highlight this text, right click, edit hyperlink, And up here on the text to display, I'm going to change this to Community Guide and say OK. And then I'm going to come here and delete the redundant text. So now, when a screen reader encounters this document, it will say there are 10 links on this page, and it will read through the text of the link. So instead of reading that long URL, it's going to say Community Guide. So this is more accessible to make our hyperlinks descriptive. Let's see, so I'm going to come here. I'm going to select Normal before exceptions. It's already normal. Select here, Normal. Select here, designated as normal paragraph. Here, normal paragraph. And I'll also note right here that the numbering system was created using the built-in numbering system, and so that's okay. You don't want to manually put numbers on pages. Here, normal, and here is not normal, but I'm going to select normal. I'm going to scroll back to the top of the page, and when we save this document, now we have an accessible Word document. Another feature that you can use with Word that increases the accessibility, similar to what I did with your handout today, is to add a table of contents. So I'm going to put my cursor here at the top where I want the table of contents to appear above. Select References at the top. On the left, Table of Contents. And I'm going to use this automatic table. And now when I scroll up, you'll see there's my table of contents. My title is at the top. All of my headings are numbered. My my sections are numbered 1 through 9. And then these are active links to content within the document. So that also helps with accessibility. So we've created this document, and the next thing we need to do is to be sure that we add our title and our subject and keywords, and to specify that the language of this document is English. The way you do that is in File, Properties. You might need to go to Properties in the version of Word that you use. I'm going to come to the right and select Properties. You can click this text box and add your title here, but we need to go to the Advanced Properties to also add the language, so I'm going to use this for both. If I select Summary, here I'm going to type my title. Your title should always match the text that we just highlighted as Heading 1. So it would be the full title, Policy Regarding Service Animal Access to University of Georgia Facilities. So there's my title. For subject, I'm going to fill this in, Service Animals. These help when searching the document. The author is there, and keywords, I might say Service Animal, comma. You want to separate your keywords by comma. Might say Policy. Maybe I'll just say UGA, Community Guide. Just you can use keywords here. Again, it helps to search the document. Now, to change or to be sure that the language is specified for this document, I'm going to select Custom. And in this drop-down list, I want to go to Language, and it'll show here. And then in the value, I'm going to type English. Okay? And so now I've just added what's called the metadata, or the title and the language, to the document. So on the list on your handout, we've gone through, we've added the title, the language, styles, normal paragraphs, a quote, created our list. We made our hyperlink descriptive so the text makes sense out of context. We didn't have any text that needed to be in what we might visually call italics or bold. If we did, we would just highlight that text and go to the styles and make it here. If we had text that needed to be in italics, it would be called emphasis, and bold would be called strong. We added a table of contents, and so the only two things we haven't done yet, pardon me for scrolling, is I'm going to add a new page. I want to share with you how to make images, inline images, accessible. So I'm going to insert picture, And I'm going to go to these sample pictures, and I'm going to select an image and insert it to my document. To make this image accessible, I'm going to right-click, insert a caption. It should always start with Figure 1. If I add another image, the system will say Figure 2, and my caption might be maybe that's my caption, and select OK. The caption for images appears below. The caption for a table appears above. So I'm going to right-click again. I'm coming to Format Picture, and this is extremely important. This is a 508 requirement for all images, whether it's a graph, a chart, or a photograph. You need to add alt text. And alt text is a short, concise description of the image. And as I mentioned on a separate slide on the handout, it should be 100 characters or less. And so I'm going to type, you should always use the description field in Word 2010 or earlier versions of Word. If they have two locations for adding your text, always use the description field, so when you export this to another format, it will come through as alt text. So for my description, I might just say Blue Ridge Mountains and close this. So that's how we've made an image accessible. You can also, if you have a longer image, or if you have, a more complicated image, or if you have a chart or a graph, I have an example, and I'll go to that slide when we finish with the application sharing, but there is an example in the handout today. And essentially what you would do, and we mentioned this earlier, is if this was like a chart, a pie chart, or a graph, where you want the students to draw conclusions based on the visual appearance of the item, you would describe the visual appearance of the chart or graph and then ask the students to make an interpretation based on that. So you're not providing answers to homework assignments or quizzes by providing the alt text or the text surrounding the image. You're just visually describing the image for individuals who can't see that. So for example, sighted individuals would encounter a chart or graph, and they would visually interpret it and then draw a conclusion based on what they see. And so all we're doing is the first step, and that is we're describing the visual appearance of a chart or graph. So next I'm going to add a table. I'm going to go to Insert, Table, and I'm going to make this table this size. Now, Word and PowerPoint, it's very difficult to make tables accessible, and so if you do include tables, you should always have tables that are very, very simple. In HTML or PDF, you can create more complicated tables, but it's difficult to make an accessible table in in Word and PowerPoint. So here I might just say month. I'm going to fill this out real quick. January, February, March, maybe I'll put a year here. And go here, and I'm going to put 2011. So I've completed my chart, and what I need to do now, my table, is right-click, insert a caption. This is Figure 2 now in this document, and I'm going to call this first, quarter sales. So you are required to have a caption. It's interesting it put it below. You are required to have a caption for your images, and you should also provide a summary. And the summary is text that you just type surrounding the image to describe the image more fully. Again, if it's a document that's like lecture notes, you would describe the image or chart or graph, and then in the interpretation, if it's a quiz or a homework assignment, you wouldn't provide the interpretation. You go to your table properties, select row, repeat as header row at the top of each page. This is a 508 requirement. here is where we add our alt text. Again, we want to make sure we put it in the description field, and I will call this first quarter sales. And OK. So this is how you make a table or an image, a table accessible. And again, Section 508 requires that you have headers here on the columns as well, but Word does not allow you to add them, so you should keep your table very simple. So what I'd like to do next is close Word, and if you'll give me just a moment, when you save this as a PDF, you never want to say print to a PDF because I mentioned earlier that's not going to be accessible. You want to save as, and I'm going to scroll through my options and select PDF. It does require that you have the full version of Acrobat to save it as a PDF. So if you don't and you can only print to PDF, you want to be sure that you post both the accessible Word document and the printable PDF file on your website or in your course. So you would save as a PDF and then select your options, and you want to be sure this checkbox is selected, document the structure tags for accessibility, and you would say OK, and then you would save this document. I'm going to call this so I need to close this and then open this in as a PDF file because I'm only currently sharing Word. So if you give me just a moment. I'm going to go back to the slide. And I'm going to share Acrobat. And OK, so what I've done first is I have, let's see if I can make this. There we go. What I've done first is I've opened the original document in Acrobat because what I want to share with you is that we don't always get accessible content or correct results when we used the internal quick check or full check accessibility features in PDF. And this is one of the things that can make it very difficult to create PDF files. Once you learn how to create them, it can be easy, but it can also be difficult if you're not that familiar with coding, HTML coding, to make your PDFs accessible. But what I'd like to do first is to share that Acrobat has a built-in accessibility checker. I'm going to do a quick check. Now this quick check says no accessibility problems detected, but we know that's not true because we just went in and changed it from visual title to an actual true heading. We created it as a style in Word, and it's going to be a tag in PDF. So we know this is incorrect. The next thing I like to do is show you the advanced accessibility full check. And you use the Adobe PDF. There's an option here for Section 508. The reason we don't use it is a good number of the 508 requirements apply to websites and not documents. So you can use Adobe PDF. Be sure all these items are checked. And say start checking. The checker found no problems, but we know that's not true. Now if you have, it will open up an accessibility report. If we did have an error, we could select the link and it would show us where the error was. I'm going to close this report. If you have the original document, just as we had the original Word document, it's significantly easier to go back, make your original document accessible, and then save it as a PDF file. If you didn't have that option, you would come to View, Navigation Panels, Tags, and this is the Tags panel, and this is the structure that we're going to add. Expand your Tags panel, and you want to come over to Options and select Highlight Content, and that means when I select a tag, and this is a paragraph tag, it will highlight in the document what that tag is associated with. So we know that these are not paragraphs, this is actually a title. And so what you would have to do in Word, close your Tags panel, go to Advanced, Accessibility, Touch Up Reading Order, and I'll move this. I'll move it down here so we can see it. And what you'll do is you'll draw a square around the title, release. Maybe this is better. Okay. Release, and make sure that it highlights all of the text in the heading. And then we're going to come here and we're going to say heading 1. And now it's going to be a heading. So I'm going to close this. Now I need to go back to View. And you can see how this is more cumbersome than just making your original Word document accessible. View, Navigation Panel, Tags, and now this is an H1. And what you need to do, pardon me, there we go. That's now an H1. So you would have to go through the entire document. That says it's a paragraph. It's really just a little artifact. If you need to make corrections, you have to correct them in 2 places. First, I'm going to hit the delete key and delete this artifact in the tags, but I also have to go to Content, Expand Page 1. Again, you have to go to Options and ask it to highlight content. I'm going to select this container, and that's my artifact, and I have to delete it here as well. Then go back to Tags. This is Paragraph. This text we know is really a heading 2. So I'm going to right-click on the existing tag, go to Properties, change it from Paragraph, and scroll up a little bit, find my heading 2, and close that. This is now a heading 2. So essentially we need to go through this 6-page document and make all of these corrections, because if you didn't have the original Word document to make accessible. And that's why it can be, for some people, very difficult to make PDF files accessible. But what I'd like to do is to close this PDF document, and open, I know you're seeing a blank screen at the moment. If you'll hold 1 second, I think I need to close App Share and open it again. One second, sorry about that. I'm new to this, new to Collaborate's App Share feature. Okay, let's see if I can open the document this way. Might be easier. And I am going to select the PDF document, and this is the Word document saved as PDF. Again, you can go to the advanced accessibility checkers, but because we know they give inaccurate results, what's recommended is that you always go to the View, Navigation Panels, Tags, move this over, expand your tags, select Options, highlight content, and tab through these and make sure this is a heading 1. We know that's correct. Now there's an artifact there again. So what do we have to do? We have to delete it here. Go to Content, Expand, Options, highlight content, find that same artifact and delete it in both places. Go back to Tags. This is a heading 2. This is a paragraph, but look what happened here. This came through as a paragraph, but we designated it as a quote, and this is just something that happens. So I'm going to right-click, go to Properties. I'm going to change it from paragraph to quote, and close. It will translate this quote into your content tag. It just won't delete in both places. So again, you can go through your document. You can check. We see that the list is there. All the heading 2s are there. And this is not the version that has the image. If it was an image, it would say figure, and it would show the alt text was there. And for that table that I created, it would also show the table. And that's where it's helpful if you know HTML coding and you know how to code a table. It's helpful here when you're checking to be sure that your table is accessible. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to pause just a moment, make sure I went through everything I wanted to go through. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to our slides. I'm going to stop here. Okay, and we're back on this slide. So these are the types
Janet, you may want to look at the chat box and go back to 1:04 p.m. All the questions are pretty sequential, and most of them refer to your demo, so you may want to just touch on that.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Let's see. I'm scrolling. Just one second. There are a lot of comments and questions. Here we go. Is it required that the title be heading 1 when you're using styles to create the table of contents? Your title should always match, the title of your document should always match heading 1. So yes, that's true. If you are using HTML, you typically only have heading 1 for your document, and that's the title. When you're using Word styles in Word, sometimes we have long Word documents that may have more than one title, so it can be okay to use more than one H1 in that circumstance, but typically one H1 that matches the title of your document. Okay, let me find the next one, just a second. Might help if I detach this panel. Just one second. No, that didn't help. Sorry, as new questions come in, as you know, the chat is scrolling, so it's hard to find them.
Okay, I'll help you. Would you use quotation marks for students without disabilities to know there is a quote also?
You should always use the quote to designate it's a true quote and not use the quotation marks. I know that in that document we saw there were some quotes that came from, it was this particular document was actually part of federal law, and so I left those quotes in there at the time. But we can't assume that individuals who access our content may or may not need the style designation as quote.
What if someone prints it from a lesson, they will not see the full link? I think that refers to the URL topic you were talking about.
Right. And that actually happened to me also when I was creating the handout for today's session, because that document, and we made it available in both PDF and Word format, and actually I noticed the email sent the PDF twice. I made it available in both formats in case one is easier for you to use, but it is true that when you do that and you print, you won't see the actual link text. So you do have to access the document electronically to see the full text of the link.
It appears that the header in your document is in serif font. Didn't you recommend that we not use that?
The font, I believe, was it Calibri? I may not have noticed the font. Let's see. I'm in PDF. I can't find it. I didn't notice that, but thank you for mentioning. If you did notice, if it was serif, then yes, you would definitely want to go back and change the font type. So thank you for noticing. I hadn't noticed that myself.
And there's a couple other things about the seeing the links, which is sometimes useful, especially if the link is broken. I think you've answered the link question. Let's see. Now somebody just scrolled me. Some publications require page numbers and citations to be manually entered. Students might encounter these articles when conducting research. Are we required to make published articles accessible?
That's interesting. It's my understanding that we would need to make all of our documents. I know we're getting an echo. Thank you. It's my understanding, yes, you would need to make content that we create accessible, whether we place it in an online course or, as you mentioned, in a different environment. But I'm not familiar with having a dilemma with something like APA guidelines and online content. And again, I'll make a note of that, and we will let the audience know the answer to that question. So thank you, and we'll get back with you on an answer to that, because that's a great question.
At my university, we are encouraged to post links instead of the actual articles, even if they are available online due to copyright issues. I guess that's just a statement. Is the formatting you are doing in Word better accessible through the screen readers than simply converting it to a text document?
Right, because I believe when you save that, and it's similar with PowerPoint, you can save the PowerPoint as an RTF file, I believe is what you might be mentioning. And when I saved the document without the styles, that formatting did not come through. And so I do believe you will need to use the styles so that when you save it as text or RTF file, which has been recommended for some for saving PowerPoint, that it will need to have the styles in the original document so they'll come through when you save it.
This was a while ago, so I'm not sure. I think it was when you were setting up your chart there. Holly wanted to know, why is this not a table? And then table 1.
I'll have to go back and look at the archive. I'm not sure.
You labeled it as figure 2.
Oh, I see what happened. Actually, that hasn't happened to me before. Thank you. That's a good catch. Actually, when I have added images and then tables, it always shows images as figure, and when I insert a table, it always comes up. And so that could be some fluke that happened today with Word. Thank you, Holly. I see your note there. It should have been table 1. It should have come through as table 1. I didn't notice that it called it a figure and not a table. But yes, you're absolutely right. It should be table 1.
Just wondering if Word to PDF will make this accessible, as most of our staff does not have full versions of Acrobat.
So if you cannot file save as PDF, then the file print to PDF will not be accessible, and you should make both versions of the document available so that individuals who need the accessibility features can use Word, and then individuals who want to print it in that print to PDF format can use that version. But no, it will not be accessible if you don't have the full version of of PDF to file save as PDF.
If you are, somebody scrolled here. If you're using a journal article, can it be converted to a PDF when it actually belongs to the journal?
Yeah, that's another like ADA type question. Pardon me. That's another question similar to, I think we would need to ask others. I'm sorry, I don't know. Like APA is what I was trying to think of. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, but we can find out and share the answer with you. I'm not familiar. I don't work with the APA requirements for publications, so I'm not sure. But it's a terrific question that I think would be beneficial to share the response with everyone on our WAG listserv, actually, because I think a lot of folks would benefit from having the answer.
Along with that, what if we require students to visit a website that does not comply?
We could run into. Thank you. We could run into the same problems that happened at the law schools, in that they were required to use an external website that was not accessible for them. So it concerns me, because we are supposed to, and I know this is difficult to do, and I'm trying to convey what 508 says, because I've encountered all these problems, most of these problems myself, and I understand the difficulty in it. But essentially what 508 says is that if we direct individuals to an external website and that is not accessible, that we should contact the designers of that website and say that if we're going to utilize the website, it should be 508 compliant, and that we should not direct our individuals outside. So I understand that can be difficult, but we are required to utilize accessible websites when we have, direct our students to accessible websites, pardon me.
Do you know how journals are addressing APA, MLA, et cetera, for online publications, since they have specific requirements?
No, I'm sorry, I don't know about the journals, but that was one of the things we said we could look into.
About if they have something they want to scan to use, will that work, or will it need to start from scratch to type to make it accessible?
Scanned is definitely not accessible because it's essentially just an image of the text. So, and I'm assuming you mean into when you save that as a PDF document. And so you can make that content available in, say, HTML format. We have a lot of folks who have copied and pasted PDF text onto a website. Then it would be accessible, and then allowed that scanned copy of the PDF to be available as a printer-friendly version, so that individuals could print from the website who maybe use refreshable braille or other types of assistive technologies. They could print it and have an accessible printed copy, and other individuals could use the PDF document. But scanned is not. And PDF, Adobe Acrobat does have a conversion, OCR conversion in the. I don't have my notes right here, and I don't have it open right now, but it does have a feature where it will convert OCR to text. There are a lot of problems with it. You do have a lot of artifacts, so you can try that, but it doesn't always work or doesn't always allow you to create an accessible document. We actually tried that in September with this very document I used as an example today, and it was very difficult for us to make it accessible.
Okay, if you could hold your questions, let me just get these last three so that Janet can get back on to the slides, because we have about 20 minutes left. Is there a way for soft chalk to be accessible?
I'm not familiar with soft chalk, but again, I'll look that up and check, and we can share our findings with the group, because I think your question may well represent a question for a lot of different people as well. So soft chalk, we'll look that up as well.
And then last two kind of come together. What about videos like TED videos, or is YouTube accessible?
Okay, first, maybe we could address that. I'm about to go into the multimedia part, and so we can talk about that. And so let's talk about that during our multimedia discussion. But
okay, let's
thank you. Sorry, Jim.
Go ahead, you can do YouTube.
Okay, sorry, I was just going to say YouTube video can be made accessible, but unless captions are added to the video on YouTube, they are not automatically accessible.
Okay, let's go back to the slides.
Okay, if you give me just a moment, you'll notice on your handout there are more slides for Word and PDF documents, more information on text equivalents and long descriptions, and a few more slides about PDF. Most of the information I covered while I was speaking during the demo, so I'm going to now go straight to the multimedia section. So if you hold on one second, I'll find my first slide. That should be here. Okay. Multimedia content is required to be accessible. If you have an audio-only file, you should provide a text-only transcript of the audio component, and just a reminder that transcript must be in an accessible format. And so somebody asked a question earlier about audio files. There has been some talk in the 508 refresh about whether to require captions for audio files, and that has not been finalized or determined yet. It is possible to add captions to an audio-only file, but right now we are required to provide a text transcript of the audio. For audio and video combined, first, you must provide synchronized captions. They are a requirement for audio-video. and a text transcript of the audio component. We also answered a question earlier about a video description. If it's not a talking head, then you should provide a description of what's taking place in the video so that individuals who can't see the video will understand the description. And I'd like to share, I have some links here. We have a video online that is captioned. There is a text transcript that's in accessible, screen reader accessible format, HTML, and you could post an accessible Word or PDF document also. And we also have a video description. So if you'd like to see examples of those, you can go to this website that's in the handout, and you can look at those examples. The example on the WebAIM video, if you remember from the very beginning of our presentation, did not have video description, and those were just like talking heads, just people talking about things, so those were not required. You do have the option to combine your text transcript and your video description so that it doesn't have to be two separate slides. And so this is a link to an example of combining the two together, just to share with you, because our example up here actually has two separate files. For audio narrated PowerPoint presentations, and I would like to ask you all to make one correction on your handout for today, and this is on page 9 in the center of the page. For some reason this text did not come through on the printed handout, and so I would like to be sure that everybody adds this. If you could just add it in onto your handout, that an audio narrated PowerPoint presentation requires synchronized captions. You also need a text-only transcript of the audio and then descriptions of the slides. You can create, actually quite easily, captioned audio narrated PowerPoint presentations in Camtasia, and so if you haven't used this product before, it's actually one of the simplest products I've ever used to create captioned presentations, and it's very simple. And so I have more information for you in just a minute about some resources, but this is a terrific product for creating accessible audio narrated PowerPoint presentations. And we do need to keep in mind that our students may not necessarily prefer an audio narrated PowerPoint presentation over providing the information in text format, so it is important to consider the use of audio and video in our online courses. I have a slide here about the differences between captions and subtitles. I'm not going to read through all of this information right now, but I would like to be sure that everyone is aware that there is a distinct difference between captions, which are accessible, and subtitles, which may or may not be accessible. And so one of the main differences that captions are a separate text stream, and subtitles are actually overlaid in part of the video stream, and so they may or may not be accessible. And I just want to be sure that we just point out that there is a difference between the two. I do have some resources for making multimedia content accessible. We know that typically in all of our discussions here at the University of Georgia with our web accessibility group, one of the biggest concerns in higher ed with academic classes is the cost and the time associated with creating Section 508 compliant multimedia. We have to do it, and so it's important to have resources, know some resources. You may check with the Disability Resource Center or Accessibility Technology Center at your institution to find out if they provide any assistance on this topic in this area. But I would like to also share that one of the companies that we use when we outsource some of our captioning is Automatic Sync Technologies. And there is, they provide some educational pricing. I'm going to read it to you in just a second. And the same information is available as a handout on our Web Accessibility Group website under Resources and Additional Resources. So the company has given us permission to post the education pricing on our Web Accessibility Group handout. So this is their current education pricing system. If you only need captioning, it's $69 per media hour. If you only need them to provide a transcript, it's $93 per media hour. And if you need the company to provide both captioning and transcription, then it's $162 per media hour. So that's their current pricing structure. We have asked sometimes faculty if they're getting a grant for a project, we will ask them to include captioning in their grant, and we've had a lot of folks write it into grant funding. We have a faculty member who met with me a couple of months ago, and we sat down. He's going to have video content every week in his course, and he has hired a graduate assistant, and we sat down and determined about how much time or money it would cost him to have these weekly audio video files made accessible and what was required. And so he actually included that as part of his students' responsibilities. And so you may have funding available, or you may need to be creative with funding if you want to outsource. And so we have a blend. We outsource some of our captioning, and we also do some transcription, and I've done manual captioning myself. Another product is Camtasia Studio, and I've just mentioned this with audio narrated PowerPoint presentations. They do have education pricing, and I'm going to take a guess. I believe it's about $170 to purchase this software product. And it works terrific when you are creating an audio narrated PowerPoint presentation. I think we've had some with 50 or more slides, and it worked fine. Camtasia Studio also gives you the ability to do some video editing, to add overlays or text boxes on video, to do a lot of other different fancy things. So if you wanted to use Camtasia Studio for video production, I do want to mention that there are some limitations, and I would recommend contacting the company. They have a terrific help desk, and tell them how you plan to use the product, and be sure that it will allow you to create your video project in Camtasia. Simple projects that tend to be 20 minutes or so are okay, but longer video projects, you may not be able to create them in Camtasia Studio. There is a free product. It's called Magpie, and this is from WGBH. And they also have a great resource, Accessible Digital Media Guidelines. And so if you're considering using this as a free software where you would both transcribe and manually create your captions for your synchronized captions for your video projects. And they also have a download here. I used Magpie several years ago, and before we started to outsource. And I do remember at the time it was fairly easy to use, but I haven't used more recent versions, and so I can't personally attest to them. But this is a terrific company, and they have great help available for you also, and it is a free option if you want to use it. There's another company called Universal Subtitles, and this has been very popular with some in higher education because, again, it's free. It's an open source service. But you do have to remember, as someone mentioned recently in the text chat, that for this and many other reasons, it overlays the text, and individuals may miss important visual information, and they may not be accessible, and individuals who have hearing impairments prefer captions, and so that's important to mention. But having said that, if this is your only option, which we hope you might be able to create true captions, this is a popular source that people use. You can caption other people's web video, so if you wanted to show a video clip in your class, you could use Universal Subtitles to create an accessible video, and you can post it to a website, including YouTube. And then we also mentioned YouTube earlier, and I'm not sure if this was the specific question the person had or if they just wondered about YouTube in general. YouTube has an option to create captions for you, and every person I've spoken to says it will take you 10 times longer to correct the mistakes than it does to use a different product to start with. And so the results are unreliable at this time. It may improve in the future, but at this time it really is not a good option. It can take a long time. If you have a long video, it can take a long time. So a few other things. I mentioned Flash tutorials earlier. You can make Flash tutorials extremely accessible, but one thing that you must do is incorporate accessibility at the time the tutorial is designed or created. And so I would recommend talking to someone who's a Flash developer, whoever is creating your content, and be sure, because sometimes even in Flash, and we were talking about this at our meeting this morning, you might just go 2 steps down the path and find out something you did previously. You didn't use the accessibility features, but you couldn't go back. In the versions of Flash that we use, you couldn't go back and fix those mistakes. And so you really need to ensure that accessibility is part of the original design, and there are some helpful resources available for you for creating Flash content. We did have a couple people send questions about math equations. There are terrific examples of accessible math equations available at CATIA's website. They're on Georgia Tech, and they have a section called Model of Accessible Courses, and there's a course called Intro to Fluid Mechanics, and I've provided the link on the handout. And again, this has great examples of accessible math equations and formulas and things like that. So if that does apply to you, I would strongly recommend to go to this website and read their examples, and then you'll be able to quickly tell how to make your own math equations accessible. And I think I'm going to hold on this screen because we might get a question, and I know somebody sent a question earlier prior to the registration. I'm going to keep the slide on the screen, but go back and ask about the questions that have come in regarding accessibility of multimedia.
Okay, well, we got about a few, like about 1 million. I teach film classes, and hang on, I just lost it. I teach film classes. Do I have to try to provide transcripts, etc., for complete films beyond what is offered on the DVD?
So for that question, I would recommend contacting, in your situation I believe is unique, and I would recommend contacting the Disability Resource Center at your institution. And if you're not able to receive the answer that you're looking for, please feel free to contact me, because we also talked about something to this effect this morning in our web accessibility group, and we felt that there are some times where the situation is very personalized towards a course, and so we would prefer to direct you to your institution and then let the web accessibility group know if you don't find the answer you want, and we will help with that.
Can Camtasia be used on existing videos?
Yes, absolutely. You can import an existing video into Camtasia, and then you can go into the caption feature and then manually enter captions as you're watching the video display. So yes, you can.
If we are taking a current course and making it 508 compliant, would we be better to hide non-compliant components until we can get them compliant?
You know, I know we laugh, but that's a very serious concern, and I encountered the same thing myself when I first learned about accessibility and suddenly said, wow, I have all this content on my course. My recommendation would be to use your accessibility statement that we mentioned at the beginning of today's seminar, and ask if there's any content that isn't accessible, and if they need the accessible content, to contact you. And I would put that statement on your course, because that's encouraging people to let you know if they encounter the inaccessible information while you're in the process of making the rest of your content compliant. Because we don't know, and it could also depend on whether your course is fully online at a distance, where you know, we're not allowed to ask people if they have a disability, because that's a violation of like equal opportunity laws. But you can post your statement, and then if nobody responds to that statement, and we actually had this confirmed by our own Equal Opportunity Office here at UGA, if someone doesn't respond to that statement, then you would be okay to work on the content as you've described.
What about a project such as iSpring for Flash PowerPoints?
I have not heard of that product, but again, I'll make a note of that as well, and we will provide answers again to the Web Accessibility Listserv, which is where I'm actually going to direct folks after today if you have any questions. We'll look at these responses because I believe here at UGA and at other institutions in the system, people have the same questions. So I'm not familiar with that, but we will look for an answer.
Okay, let me see here. If I provide a streamed copy of a complete film with the captions on the video stream, but not as a separate feed that could be turned on, is that sufficient?
It would be acceptable, but it's good to note that it's also preferable if it is in a separate video stream. So if it were me, I don't think I would go back and change that, but I do think in the future I would try to have it be a separate stream now that we know that definitely individuals who need the captioning prefer it as captioned as a separate stream.
To avoid copyright infringement, some websites associated with music textbooks link to iTunes. I wonder if iTunes is accessible or if you have to do something on our end.
As far as the interface, it can be accessible. We've had discussions on a different international accessibility listserv that I'm on, and some people find it difficult to navigate, and others, depending I think on their assistive technologies, find it okay to actually navigate YouTube. And then we do have some folks who use universal subtitles to caption the YouTube video that they want to make accessible on YouTube itself.
And we'll do two more questions and then turn it back over to you. Any ideas about Vimeo as far as a tool goes, or an application?
The last time I checked, you could not make content, you could not display captioned content in Vimeo, and that was a couple months ago. We had a discussion on that, and it didn't provide the ability to create captioned video.
And then the last one, which is kind of an open-ended or open question, would you like to make any statement about AV on mobile devices?
Yes, that's very interesting. There's a lot of work in progress, for making video content that's delivered on mobile devices also accessible. And so I don't have any comment right now because I've just sort of been following and watching what other people are doing. I haven't been engaged in it myself. Pardon me, but there are either ways to do it now or they're very close to making that available.
Okay, back to you for wrap-up.
Great. So the last thing that I would like to share with you today, I know we just went over time, but this is a really terrific resource that it's listed in the end of your handout. It's a distance education accessibility guidelines document, and it's published by California Community Colleges. And they have terrific information in here about distance learning and courses. There are some great questions in the back. There's a frequently asked questions section beginning on page 28 of this document, and they talk about using video in password-protected environments where you have posted essentially your accessibility statement and nobody has responded that they require captioning, and that California Community Colleges has said that they don't require that particular video to be captioned. But there are requirements. It must only be used for a single term, and you have to be sure that nobody in the course requires captioning. So I want to make sure that we show this link, and be sure that you go and check that information if you are concerned. We also checked with our Equal Opportunity Office, and she responded to me just this morning and said, if you post your accessibility statement on your syllabus and your website, and if nobody responds saying they require captions, it's in a password-protected environment used only for a single term, then you would not, in that specific instance, be required to have your online course video captioned. So I just want to point that out and share this guide with you for future reference. This is my contact information. Please feel free to post any questions you have to the WAG listserv. And the reason I ask is that the Web Accessibility Group is housed here at UGA, but it's open to everyone in USG. We have lots of USG folks as part of our group. We all benefit from these questions and answers today, and so I would ask that you join the listserv and post any questions that you have so that everyone in the group can benefit. And that was the reason we created the Web Accessibility Group, so that we could benefit from research and knowledge that we have. Most of the people are new, so please feel free to do that as well, and thank you for being here today.